What's up, FJ Nation? You're listening to Forum Junkies, a program that promotes your anguish and feeds on your sweet, delicious tears. I'm your host, Spiritus. Joining us this week as a special guest host, the guy with the sword and board, TankSpot's author and former editor of the Wordy Warrior blog, Ariedan. And joining me as always, the ferocious feral, the bear that bears all, the man who put the rage into the rage bar, Darksend. On this week's episode, we'll be highlighting interesting posts made on WoW forums from across the internet on subjects including goodbye threat, hello active tanking, 15-player raid sizes, will Cataclysm be too short, and the discussion over what can make WoW great again. But first, I want to invite you to like us on Facebook at facebook.com/forumjunkies. Follow us on Twitter at forumjunkies, all one word, and add us on Google+. Also, you can now sub to Forum Junkies on iTunes. So, first I want to get into a little bit of sad news and a little bit of good news. Papa Paint, unfortunately, will no longer be co-hosting on the show because he's landed a spot in a band called Arduro playing bass, or Aduro at any rate, which is one of his passions is playing music. So, between all the practices and gigs, which will be required for him to basically travel all around the country, he'll no longer be able to co-host on FJ. But the good news is he'll still be working with us behind the scenes in a pre and post production capacity. But I also promised to plug his band, so if you would go over and check out Aduro. Hold on, let me do the voice. Check out Aduro over at Facebook at facebook.com/Aduro ADURO the band. So joining us as a special guest host this week is Ariedan, and we're really lucky to have her. And thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Cool. So, Darksend, do you have anything to add? Okay, great. We'll go on to our next post. So,
I love it. I wasn't going to say anything anyway.
I know, but you were supposed to laugh. So, the first post we're highlighting today comes from Swelt on TankSpot, who writes about the changes to threat and the proposed active tanking model. Swelt writes, quote, "Sky is falling. Run to the caves. Or maybe it'll just be a fairly simple quality of life shift for tanks. I'd expect the tanks will still want to be maxing their DPS, because why not? So you'll still want to keep a decent rotation going. It just won't be because some reckless Fury Warrior is riding your tail on the threat meter. More interesting, the long-term changes echo previous water cooler discussions about making tanking more dependent on threat stats, i.e., making tanks' rotation contribute more to their survival than to threat. Potentially interesting stuff. As I tank on both DK and Warrior, I'm very conscious of this. Threat on the DK seems much easier, but I know that when I do my rotation well, then that helps me survive a lot better. On my Warrior, I feel the reverse is true. Sure, I can blow a cooldown or two, or do something nifty with leaping or intervening to escape an imminent death, but by no means do the buttons I press in my rotation have the same effect on keeping myself alive." Again, that was Swelt from TankSpot. Now, GC totally hijacked our Vengeance topic from last week by revealing the new sweeping change to Vengeance and promising a more active tanking model soon, trademark, on the dev cooler. So basically, what he's meaning by this is he wishes tanks to press more buttons more frequently to mitigate damage rather than to deal it. If you don't know, it was our episodes are recorded on Monday evenings. And the dev cooler dropped like less than 24 hours later, kind of making the whole discussion we had.
6 hours after we finished.
Yeah,
recording.
right, like 6 hours. So it kind of made like the whole discussion we had pretty moot. Though I kind of think it's funny that we came to the general consensus of Vengeance being too powerful, and then GC was like, "Oh yeah, watch this, skadoosh." but with this information now, we can address this topic again and with a little more information about the directional model. So what do you guys think? Are we going to be talking like threat schmet in a month? Or like more importantly, what of the idea of like a truly active tanking model? Do you like it? And if so, what would you like to see it be all about?
Well, I want to address something I said in last week's episode, and that is that 29 to 33 second mark. With this threat change, in the past, it had been when that tricks and misdirects falls off, you lose like 20 or 30% of your threat. Now, you're barely losing 5 or 10% of your threat when that wears off. But at that point, the next highest person is only at 20% now anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Yay, Blizzard for fixing initial threat. As for active tanking, this change is amazing, but I swear, Blizzard, you are pissing me off so much because I'm speechless. We asked for this all during the alpha and the beta for this expansion. I either I made the majority of those posts asking for it, or I posted in all of them. There were so many of them from so many different people. Why are you doing this now when we asked for this a year ago? Why did you not do this when you had time during the alpha and the beta to actually get this right? You are not going to be able to completely redesign 3 tanking classes to work more like a DK mid-expansion. So my thinking right now is they're not going to be able to pull this off for 4.3, so they're giving us threat now, making threat irrelevant, and we're not going to see these changes until 5.0. And from that point of view, as much as I want to see active tanking, I am going to be bored out of my mind until 5.0. I'm basically going to be a spectator until active tanking gets put in.
Actually, Darksend, I'm going to have to disagree with you. I haven't actually played in a long time, so I don't really know the state of affairs in current endgame, but I briefly played in the beginning of Cata, and frankly, I don't like the direction that they're taking. I don't know. The beauty of tanking for me was that it was just a very intricate dance. And I remember in BC having to focus your optimal threat rotation while keeping up your debuffs, your shield block if you're a warrior, using your cooldowns appropriately, repositioning, and for many of us, raid leading and communicating the boss's special abilities, all while fighting the raid DPS and staring at Omen. And I know that's what they're trying to get away from. But I mean, a Ghost Caller said that he basically wanted, he wanted us to focus more on survivability and mitigation, but I just don't understand why you have to pick one or the other.
Well, the majority of the posts I made during alpha and beta were there should be a choice between you hit button A for threat and button B to increase your mitigation. So basically, take for example, if Shield Slam and Shield Block shared a cooldown, and if you needed more threat, you hit Shield Slam, and if you needed mitigation, you hit Shield Block. Those kind of decisions where threat would actually matter, or if you needed that more mitigation, you would have that more mitigation. What I think they're doing is, when you had to hit shield block every 5 seconds, it was considered too spammy. I think the reason it was called spammy in the past is because, like you said, I love those things you mentioned, having to balance threat, raid DPS, movement, calling out bosses' abilities. Those made tanking fun. Right now, there's really none of that in the game. You basically, even before this threat change went in, if you held aggro past the first 10 seconds of the fight, you really didn't lose aggro. And most of the big, if you stand in this, you die abilities have not targeted tanks since Old War. That was the last time those abilities could actually choose tanks as their target. Half the bosses now are stationary, so you don't even have to move. You can't even move them. So tanking has just been dumbed down and dumbed down and dumbed down, and now they're dumbing it down even more. And as much as I want active tanking, we're not going to see it until they actually have an entire expansion's worth of development time to bring it out. We're not going to see active tanking in 4.3, and if we do, it's going to be completely imbalanced. So basically, it's going to be to the point where taunt has no cooldown and lasts infinite duration when you use an ability like Shield Slam or Mangle. That's the way the game is going to be. So what you're focusing on, instead of a rotation for threat, your rotation is for mitigation, where you have to do the perfect rotation in order to survive the boss's big hits. The only reason tanks were ever interested in threat is because 95% of the time, whether we live or die, is the healer's responsibility. The 5% it's not is, did we use a cooldown at the right time? Blizzard addressed this during alpha, saying, well, if we make two tanks too dependent on their own survival, then what are healers going to do? So basically, Blizzard is saying it's okay for tanks to be bored because there's more healers than tanks. And they're finally getting away from that philosophy, which they had earlier, and I'm happy about that. But if they do this, then we're going to start seeing healers complain again. So they have to have the expansion time for development to get this right. I'm just worried at the timing is. I love this change, but this timing is just upsetting me so much.
As you said, I mean, if they go through with it, soon, whenever that is, the idea of a choice signifies some sort of skill. But as of right now, it does feel like the sky is falling because everybody else is just going to see how it is at the moment. It's just, like you said, it's an odd placement, odd timing for them to throw this change in here without really showing the finalized product of it, I guess.
Well, I mean, before you said you like doing having your rotation matter. If your rotation mattered and what it mattered for was mitigation and threat, it still matters. It's just changing the end result.
It wasn't the rotation. It wasn't the threat, the numbers or anything. It was the concept of doing it all at once, of basically keeping tabs on all of it. It's like keeping up and saying, okay, I've got this left on this debuff, I've got this left on the shield block, and, meanwhile going through your rotation and going and positioning the boss and keeping an eye on the boss's cooldowns. I don't know, maybe I'm just getting too nostalgic about old mechanics. about how it used to work, and I understand that everything's different now, but for me that was what the challenge was. It wasn't pressing large numbers and, you know, because I mean, still, I mean, was there any skill in pressing, like, you know, oh, shield slam's up, let's go ahead and hit this? I mean, is there really any skill in that? It was the dance of weaving all of those abilities in right when they are, you know, they needed to be used. Not, you know, oh, I need to refresh shield block. Give me a second. Let me finish with this rotation here. Threat's more important. And I get what you're saying is that, you know, you should have a choice, you know, like this boss is hitting really hard during this phase. Let me switch using these abilities and instead start using these abilities to keep me, you know, alive more. Oh, this phase is over, now I can go back.
Your objection is basically not so much that they're getting rid of threat, it's that threat was the last connection to when tanking was actually interesting, as opposed to just standing in front of a boss and hitting your cooldown at a scripted time, because all the abilities are scripted perfectly now.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like there's no challenge in just standing there on a tank and spank fight and predicting what, you know, Deadly Boss Mods is going to say for what the boss is about to do. Oh, he's about to use big bad ability number 1 in 30 seconds. All right, get ready. All right, going to spam my shield wall macro for healer and tank chat. Okay, it's up. Oh, and it's gone. All right, healers use this macro on me, or this ability on me. I mean, that's what it feels like tanking is about. And I understand and agree with shifting focus to, you know, survivability and having more control over it. I do think that we should. I think it should be more of a conscious decision to do it. And I agree with you there. I just think that taking away threat, making it obsolete, is a bad idea.
Well, like I posted on TankSpot, Ghostcrawler in the blog specifically said, this is not the reason we're doing this, but the reason I think they're getting rid of threat is so that what they can use the argument, well, survival's too spammy, like it was when we had to hit shield block. They can now answer, no, it's not spammy because you're not worrying about threat anymore. Spammy meant both things at once. Now it's only threat, or it's only damage, or it's only mitigation. So they're making this change simply to get rid of the spammy argument.
Okay, the next topic is about moving all raids to a 15-player format and introducing an easy mode in addition to normal and heroic. Serule from the official forums made this post on the topic. Serule writes, quote, I propose making all raids 15-man, dropping 10 and 25, and adding a third difficulty, quote, easy. 25s are much harder to maintain, as could be seen from the number of raiding guilds in 10 versus 25 just from WoW progress. It's something like a 4-to-1 ratio of 10 to 25 last time I checked. Dropping down to 15 would help 25s with much of the issue your average 25-man raiding guild is having. Upping 15 from 10 will help 10s with class balance and should drop more loot per boss to help alleviate RNG loot issues. Changing to a single 15-man format and adding an easy difficulty setting would allow for tuning of 3 raids instead of the current 4. Again, that was Serule from the official forums. Now, 15-player raids aren't anything new. Blackrock Spire was 15-player prior to patch 1.1, right?
It was unlimited, and then it was 15, and then they eventually made it 10, but they didn't make it 10 until, like, way late in the expansion.
Okay. But either case, that was during a period where either 40/25 player or 25 player raids were also available. Do you guys like the concept of removing the current 10 and 25 player formats and replacing them with 15 player formats? And also, what do you guys think about adding an intro level difficulty setting to raids below that of normal and heroic?
As far as getting rid of 25-man, I think that is a terrible idea. It's obvious, the numbers don't lie, that 25-man guilds aren't successful at this expansion, and my own guild died, so I know that from my own experience. But to be fair, I mean, it didn't happen until they changed the raid lockouts this expansion. It's just not flexible. If you've got to choose one, it's easier to choose the 10-man because it requires far less effort to get an organized group together to go raid. But I know a lot of players still feel that there's just something really epic about a unified, cohesive group of individuals all intent on killing this boss, all playing a small role contributing to create the bigger picture. I mean, maybe it's just a silly sentiment, but I mean, I know lots of people agree with me on that. And to completely take it out, even if it's just subtract 10, it just doesn't feel as good. I know it's a cheesy analogy, but it's like, if any of you did music, it's like doing a small little ensemble compared to doing, a giant, huge concert. and looking up and seeing everybody's playing a small role. It's just much larger than you.
One of the things is, though, too, if they did that easy mode, right now, even though there's only 4 difficulties to tune for, there's only 2 eye levels of gear. And like we saw with Ice Crown and with Trial, balancing 3 eye levels of gear is just a nightmare. It was too hard to balance. It was one of the reasons that they had to put in Ice Crown Radiance, because they expected to have half the number of tiers of gear that they did. There's a lot of inherent scaling that goes wrong when you have 3 sets of eye level per tier.
The only way I could see that they could do it is if they made the easy tier the same level of tier as you got from the initial dungeons, and then for the next tier, like the second tier for the expansion, made the easy tier the same that you would get in normals. That is the only way I could see they could do it.
I guess I could solve that, but maybe I just was using that as an excuse to say I don't want 15-man raids. I mean, maybe if it was 20, I could see a few people my raid could get rid of, but 15 is cutting a little too many people.
Really? That's where you're going with this? Man, I don't like Bob and Joe. I guess we'll go to 20-man. Seriously. But I don't know. They're talking about like the dungeon finder, not the dungeon finder, but having a raid finder now. And that's a pug. I mean, that's straight up a pug. And they pretty much had said that they wanted the hack and the slashed off like difficulty of the previous tier to be the puggable thing. And I guess I'm arguing from the standpoint of where the game is going rather than where I want the game to go. But I mean, maybe it is a good idea.
I want to ask this poster. I want to ask Serule, what guild are you in right now? Are you a pugger? Are you in a 10-man guild? Or are you in a 25-man guild? Because if you're a pugger, why would you want to add extra difficulty to trying to get your pug together? If you're in a 10-man, I guess maybe you have. That is one problem that I've noticed with 10-man guilds compared to 25. 25-man guilds have maybe 4 or 5 people sitting out. 10-man guilds have 7 or 8 sitting out, because there are certain things where you still need a specific class for encounters. For example, in Throne of the Four Winds on Conclave, you had more versatility in a 25-man raid, whereas if you didn't have certain classes on sit out in your 10-man, you would never be able to do that on hard mode. So so in that sense, going to 15 makes sense for a 10-man raid. But also, if you're in a 25-man raid, why are you in a 25-man raid if you're not happy in such a large group? The people doing 25-man raids, as your post indicated from WoW Progress, the people in 25-man raids right now are the people that want to be doing 25-mans and have a solid raid group that they've been raiding with for years and years and years and function well as a group and get along. That's why we do 25-mans. If it weren't for people like us, 25-mans probably wouldn't exist.
But isn't it the same argument as when they dropped it from 40 to 25?
40-mans were just really, really bad. You could 30-man a lot of the 40-man content until now, because that many people were not pulling their weight.
So, Ariedan, what do you think about the easy mode? Like, do you think that's something that could be put in or should be put in, or?
I agree with Darksend, actually. I think that it's entirely too complex and tedious, and it's just going to require too much fiddling around, and it's not going to work out. I mean, if they want to make something that's more puggable, they should just honestly have tuned down the first normal mode and tune up the hard modes. They make something extra harder. I just think 3 modes, it's a little overkill.
Okay, well, our next topic is on the relative length of the Cataclysm expansion. Hades from the official forums writes, quote, "As I see, Deathwing will die in patch 4.3. There we go. Rumors about the Mist of Pandaria were true. But why was this expansion so short?" Again, that's Hades from the official forums. And, you know, it seems appropriate that this topic, that a topic about how short Cataclysm might be is accompanied by the shortest post we've highlighted on this show. But while this topic might seem a little sparse, it does bring up some pretty interesting things. Namely, what does a short expansion mean to players in practical terms? I mean, from a content perspective, I guess it really doesn't matter how quickly expansions come, but rather how far apart like the major content patches are released. But I guess there's also like a storyline to consider and like the epic feel of the overall expansion, which is something I think Papa Pain probably would have talked about because he seems to enjoy bringing up the RP factor of MMO gaming. But for example, doesn't it feel like a little more epic when the Cataclysm happens and then you trek to the greatest depths, climb to the tallest peaks, trudge through the barren wasteland, fight your way through the thickest jungle, and then, when all hope seems lost, break into the sanctum of Deathwing and punch him in the jeans. Because I gotta tell you, 4.1 and 4.2 kind of feel more like Deathwing going, I'm in your cities, busting up your towers. You want to fight? No. Hold on. Yeah, just give me a second. Crap, guys. I forgot my raid gear, so yeah. Go deal with these dudes for a bit so I can get my stuff ready. I mean, that's kind of what it all felt like. Like it just felt like it is a little short. I mean, what do you guys think?
Well, let's go back to the past expansions. 4 tiers in Vanilla, 4 tiers barely in Burning Crusade, and then 4 tiers again, barely last expansion. I say barely because the Burning Crusade was touted as the Illidan expansion. This is the expansion where you're going to go and you're going to kill Illidan. And we killed Illidan, and then we waited a year, and we thought after that year we were going to get the next expansion, but instead we got Sunwell, which is still one of the better instances ever, but it wasn't an instance that anyone expected because we thought, okay, we kill Illidan, and then we move on. But again, I said this in the past, we had Illidan on farm for a year. In last expansion, when, granted, I don't count the Trial as a real raid, when Trial came out, we had just killed Algalon, and we still had not killed Zero Watch or Yogg. Where that cutoff falls, it's different for every guild, where that cutoff falls per guild is on a guild by guild, is this expansion too short? For us, it was perfect length with Old War. For us with Sunwell, it was way too long in between instances. But for the other guilds, it was probably just right for them previously, and then when it was just right for us, it was too short for other people. But in both of those cases, there were instances that were not expected. Blizzard even admitted that Trial was the reason Ice Crown was so inflated, because they did not expect to have that instance in there. So I think they've been wanting to do 3 instances for a while. It's just been a precedent that they've done 4 in the past.
You know, actually, I'm going to, again, agree with Darksend on this one, in that the last couple expansions, a lot of the content, a lot of the tiers just seem really out of place. I really don't count TOC as a tier either, so, I mean, yeah, you know, they're about to release, like, this last content patch, and we haven't really heard too much about the next expansion, but as Darksend said, you know, Illidan was out, people were farming Illidan for, what, a year? That's what you said? So, I mean, we've got quite a ways away. I mean, who's to say this content isn't going to be really difficult? Who knows? Nobody knows. I think a lot of people are just too quick to jump the guns on this one. It's pretty apparent that they're trying to have more difficult content with the hard modes and stuff, so the content will probably actually last a good while, and people won't be as bored.
So basically, to both of you, it really is more about the pacing of the content across all expansions rather than like the full storyline of a particular expansion and having it feel like, okay, I am done with this particular setting for this expansion. It's more about the actual content, like the actual, I have new things to do.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're asking 2 raiders, so
right.
Yes, of course. It's the pacing and how it feels to us. Are we going to be sitting on our butts, you know, for a very long time, you know, farming this stuff on our alts? Or is it going to last us a long time and it's going to feel new and challenging as we experience, you know, the hard modes and it's actually difficult? There's a massive difference between that and sitting and farming TOC for months and months and months waiting for, you know?
Yeah, I think people are just obsessed with numbers, too. Like, if you look back to when ZA was released, ZA was its own content patch with its own number. I can't remember. I think it was 2.3 or 2.4. But it was released by itself without a major full raid tier. Now they're not doing that. Anytime they have something to put in the game, they're doing it in a 4.1.1.1.9. You know, so people are just getting obsessed with numbers, and they're saying 4.3 isn't enough numbers. We want more. And I think that's all people are really looking at.
Okay, our final topic is on the discussion over what could make WoW great again. Omnirom from MMO Champion writes, quote, "It's been about 6 months since I last logged in, though I do check out MMO Champion every week, just hoping and praying that maybe Blizzard would have made some amazing change and WoW will be back to its brilliant best. For me, it would be a big change to the way PvP works and a massive graphics update. Wintergrass was probably the last real fun I had, so something like that. And slower-paced arena games. Oh, and Witcher 2 graphics engine. What would it take for you? Or is it just too late for the whole system and engine?" Again, that's Omnirom from MMO Champion. Now, of course, one could have the argument that WoW has never ceased being great, but realistically, probably everyone has something that either they would like to see implemented in the game, or some past concept be brought back for new content. How about you guys? What would make WoW great again, or more great than it was?
Well, as someone who's taken their first break from this game in 4 years very recently, I've actually been asking myself the same question over and over again. I mean, just what went wrong? What will make it better? I'm probably going to go on a different track here than what Darksend's going to go, but I'm going to go with community. There is a lack of community now. When I first started playing, the sense of community was overwhelming. The ROM forums were constantly moving, and while Trade Chat had just as many stupid trolls, at least you recognized the names and you could talk about it to each other and make fun of them. You know, when you saw the main tank of the top guild on your server sitting idle by the bank, you stared at them. You knew who they were. You knew who the officers were. You knew every guild. You know who ran the good pugs, who ran the bad pugs. You knew all the blacklisted players, the ninjas, the drama, mongers. At any given day, I could log on and have a huge list of server friends online, and it made pugging content really easy. And then came the dungeon finder, and it was a mixed blessing. I rarely had to fully pug anything because I knew so many people in the server, but it doesn't matter who you are. You can't really find a good heroic grind fest for your newly level capped alt. I mean, so I thought it was a good thing at first, but now look at it. Flash forward, nobody needs to pug anymore. You don't get to meet new people in your server because nobody's putting together anything. Why? I mean, you've got the dungeon finder. There's no drama because, you're going to go to the server and talk about what? There's nothing to talk about. You don't know these people. You don't know what's going on with their guilds. You don't know what's going on with, the raid content. You no longer get hands-on contact with the community that you used to get. And then when Cataclysm came out, it got worse because the raid content was harder to pug. It's not, Wrath. And then, with the guild system, that just put the nails in the coffin. So the only real sense of community that you get in this game is through your own guild, which for a lot of people, that's great. And it was great for me too, but at the same time, it still isn't quite the same thing. I think that's really what's missing for the game. I mean, maybe not for everybody, but certainly for a lot of people that I've talked with. Yes, I do enjoy slaying pixelated dragons still, and I enjoy the flurry of emotions that you get when your raid group finally kills that, particularly vexing boss. But when you've been playing the game for 4, 5, 6 years, after all these expansions, I mean, raiding does get kind of stalled, and you realize that the raid content is not what has kept you going this entire time. The community is what has made this game stand out from everything else, with the sheer amount of people that have played it, and you just don't get it anymore. Yeah,
no, I used to love, before the random dungeon finder, just going to Trade Chat and being tank looking for group, or looking for 3 DPS, have tank and healer. I would literally get 50 tells in the next 2 minutes because everyone knew who I was, or they knew what guild I was in. Basically, right now, the only people outside my guild that I know are the people in the guild I used to raid 25-mans with on my ult. And I completely agree with everything you said. For me, the moment WoW started to suck and I knew WoW was going to go downhill was when they added guards to Light's Hope Chapel. That was the worst day in the history of WoW for me.
Seriously? That guards to Light's Hope, that I don't even know what to say to that. Okay, you know what? I'm going to entertain this just so I can hear what asinine thing is going to come out of your mouth.
Because even that was, a lot of people blame flying mounts for the lack of world PvP. It wasn't. Lights Hope Chapel effectively killed World PvP when they added guards there.
What? All right. I seriously, I want to hear the full blown reason behind this. Lights Hope Chapel, like of all the world PvP places, Lights Hope's Chapel.
The guards, when they added them in there, literally ran across half the zone if you attacked somewhere. Like when you could literally jump someone in Hearthglen, not even near any guards, and they would like spawn on top of you inside of Hearthglen and kill you. They were omnipotent. Like they would just spawn out of nowhere and just come kill you. The fact they put so many NPCs in there before flying mounts to limit world PvP. I mean, they based their experience off the PTR, where if you ever saw the screenshots from the Nax PTR, you would agree they were needed. But it was just so overkill, and it was just so mad at that change. And then flying mounts just nail in the coffin when they put in flying mounts, and random dungeon finder also nail in the coffin. There is no sense of community. With the random dungeon finder, it allows you to do 5-mans, yes, but you can do it not in a guild. It makes things harder to pug because you don't establish that sense of community on your own server. When you had to do 5-mans on your own server, if you did an amazing 5-man with someone, not just clearing the instance, but one of those where everything was CC'd, the healer never let you die, tanks weren't breaking CC.
You added each other.
Yeah, you added them to
ran
your friends
again.
list, and then if you weren't in guilds, if none of you were in guilds, you would then take that and form pugs for ZG or AQ20 or ZA, and you would start running those, and then you'd eventually become a small guild, and things would build up out of that. But yeah, now, I mean, even when you do group with someone from your server in the random dungeon finder, which actually happens a lot now, you finish the run, you don't even say 5 words to them. You might say hello when you zone in, and good run if you don't wipe when you leave, and that's it. That's all you'll say the whole run, and there's no communication in WoW anymore at all.
Yeah, I have to agree with that one too. I mean, now whenever I run, I do the same thing. I'm guilty of it. I'll hop right in. I'm the tank, you know. If the healer looks like they're switching specs or something and they're out of mana, I might say, hey, you know, ready? And that's it. That's all that needs to be said.
I'll link damage meters and say you suck, but that's not the extent of my communication.
Well, Darksend, you're a raging elitist. It doesn't count. But really, there's no communication. I mean, who are these people to you? You don't, there are no repercussions. If you don't know them, you don't recognize their guild name. You don't recognize some of these servers I didn't even know existed. I'm just like, what is this server? This backwater server.
I forgot. You know? I forgot what the server I saw the other day when I was leveling at alt. But it was like, I mean, I know one of them was like Area 52, which I had seen before. But I was like, really, Area 52 got a server? Like.
But yeah, I mean, back in the day, it's like, you know, it's like, look, I'm bored, or, hey, I need to go and run this to get this really elusive trinket for my alt or something. So it's like, hey, healer looking for 5-man, you know, pre-dungeon finder. And people would respond, you'd put your group together, and people would be like, hey, you know, I see you're from blank guild. You know, how's your progress on blank boss? And you're like, oh, yeah, da-da-da. See, you're from this guild. You know, you would talk. You know, you knew these people. Even if you didn't know them specifically, you knew their guilds. You knew somebody from their guild. And if you didn't know them and they were good, you would add them. And if they were bad, then you'd make fun of them in your guild chat.
So, and basically, you could fix this by putting back in the guards at Lights Hope's Chapel and getting rid of flying mounts. Oh, and by the way, the RDF. That will make WoW great again. I still can't believe that's the answer you have to making WoW great again, is removing the guards from Lights Hope's Chapel. I never said it would
make WoW great again. I said that's when I knew the game was going to start sucking.
That's the question. I can't believe you. Well, that's all the time we have for this edition. You've been listening to Forum Junkies with your guest host, Ariedan.
Yo.
Darksend.
I didn't cut my recording out this time like I did last week.
And of course, yours truly, Spiritus. Remember to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. And back by popular demand, we end our webcast with a segment we like to call Cool Story, Bro.
Transmorph is to prove that the WoW crowd is now a Barbie player crowd. They made an April Fool joke 2 or 3 years ago about changing stuff / gear into bling bling stuff. Guess what? Now it's real. Fungovi. MMO champion.